the bottom of my heart to the person who gave us $1,000 for the farm workers.
KPFA, KPFB, Berkeley, 88.1, KFCF from Fresno.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, September 30th, 24 hours after what some call the worst presidential debate in U.S. history. A debate that President Trump certainly dominated with his imperious violation of the rules he had agreed to follow, and which today he claimed to have won.
By every measure, we won the debate easily last night. I think he was very weak. He looked weak. He was whining. No, I don't mind debating him. I hear he wants to get out of the debates. I don't know. That's up to him.
The affair was such a disaster that its sponsors, the Commission on Presidential Debates, says it's considering new rules, including a possible mute switch to kill the microphone of a candidate who insists on interrupting or talking over his opponent, a change endorsed by Joe Biden.
I just hope there's a way in which the Debate Commission can control the ability of us to answer the question without interruptions.
The chair of the Wisconsin Republican Party warns Milwaukee's chief elections official that it would be illegal for any Milwaukee Bucks basketball or Brewers baseball team players or mascots, including the Brewers' famous racing sausages, to participate in early voting events planned at their stadiums in the days leading up to the election. Airline employees and executives make a futile 11th hour appeal today for Congress to approve billions of dollars more in federal aid to avert thousands of layoffs that are scheduled to start tomorrow. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin says progress in renewed talks for a relief bill is being made. Meanwhile, the Disney Corporation announces the layoffs of some 28,000 workers. And the Justice Department announces that another Black Death Row inmate who was convicted of kidnapping and killing has been scheduled for execution in November. Orlando Hall would be the 8th person executed this year as part of the Trump administration's resumption of federal executions after a nearly 2-decade pause. From Pacifica Radio, KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, this is the Evening News. I'm Mark Miracle. A day after a chaotic first presidential debate that provoked outright disgust in some, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden called President Trump an embarrassment. A reporter asked Biden about the debate at a campaign stop today in Ohio.
What do you have to say to those undecided, persuadable voters who were watching last night and were just completely turned off by politics?
I can understand it. It was, I kind of thought at one point, maybe I shouldn't say this, but the President of the United States conducting himself the way he did, I think it was just a national embarrassment.
The most defining moment last night came when moderator Chris Wallace asked President Trump to condemn white supremacists. Trump failed to do so, instead urging the violent far-right Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. Speaking on the Senate floor today, Illinois Democratic Senator Dick Durbin said he was stunned by Trump's failure to condemn white supremacy and noted Trump's words were quickly embraced by the Proud Boys.
The group immediately turned the president's words in the debate into a logo that's been widely circulated on social media. On the right-wing social media site, which I'm not going to name because I don't want to give any publicity to it, but I'll put it in the record. Proud Boys leader Joe Biggs said he took Trump's words as a directed to F them up.
Senate Democratic Minority Leader Chuck Schumer summed up Trump's debate performance last night, saying it was full of right-wing bile, lies, big and small, and in between, and quoting from the William Shakespeare play, Macbeth.
Yes, President Trump's debate performance was, in the words of Macbeth, a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. In an hour and a half that felt like a lifetime, the president managed to insult Vice President Biden's deceased son and smear a living one, please a fringe white supremacist group, and cap the night off by yet again casting doubt on our own elections, tarnishing our own democracy. Those were just his worst moments.
After what many said was a fiasco of a debate, the Commission on Presidential Debates says it will be adding what it calls additional structure to maintain order in future presidential debates. After the first debate between Trump and Biden devolved into a mess of interruptions and unintelligible crosstalk, leading the moderator to appeal to Trump to stop interrupting. Christopher Martinez reports.
So many things that once seemed normal now seem so strange in 2020. So perhaps it should be no surprise that the first presidential debate should be a debate the likes of which have never been seen before.
Ukraine.
No, sir.
With $1 billion, if you
that is absolutely
you know what,
you're,
not
true.
You're doing it.
You're going to
Not
have
tape.
true, gentlemen. I hate to raise my voice, but I see it seems to be. Why shouldn't I be different than the two of you?
5 weeks before Election Day, the event marked the first matchup between Republican incumbent Donald Trump
In 47 months, I've done more than you've done in 47 years, Joe.
and Democratic challenger Joe Biden.
You're the worst president America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
The debate was supposed to be focused on 6 issues, but often it was hard to even make out the words as candidates interrupted and talked over each other.
That is
What
not
he
true.
did
Sir,
is he
you're done in
said
this segment.
he called
Mr.
the military
Mr. Vice President,
stupid bastards.
I
and he
did
said
not
it on
say
tape.
that.
He said
Mr.
stupid bastards.
Please,
He
sir,
said it.
stop.
I would never
I
say
would
that
Play
to the
it.
military.
Play it.
By and large, the event got pretty bad reviews from pundits, ranging from CNN's Jake Tapper
It was a hot mess inside a dumpster fire, inside a train wreck.
to Republican political analyst Ron Meyer on Fox and Friends.
Well, honestly, there wasn't much great about this debate. In my opinion, it could be one of the worst presidential debates in televised American history.
Debate moderator Chris Wallace of Fox News tried to keep order in the debate, but with mixed success, despite pleas to the president.
I think that the country would be better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer interruptions. I'm appealing to you, sir, to do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more interrupting
That's
than
all
he
right,
has.
but he does plenty.
Well, less than, sir, less
there's
than.
plenty.
No, less than you have. Let's please continue on.
Of course, the debate was not totally devoid of substance. For example, the issue of race and violence selected by the moderator. Wallace asked Trump if he would condemn white supremacists and militia groups. Trump declined.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see
Well,
peace.
then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name. Go ahead.
supremacists and
Who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White
Proud Boys.
supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left.
The group Proud Boys is an all-male white supremacist group that has been banned from several social media platforms. Trump has since said he does not know who the group is, but some critics say Trump's words, "stand by," sound like a call to action rather than a condemnation. While Democrats criticize Trump on race, Trump criticizes Democrats and Biden on the issue of law and order.
And he doesn't want to say law and order because he can't, because he'll lose his radical left supporters. And once he does that, it's over with. But if he ever got to run this country and they ran it the way he would want to run it, we would have our suburbs would be gone. By the way, our suburbs would be gone, and you would see problems like you've never seen.
He wouldn't know a suburb unless he took a wrong turn.
Oh, I know suburbs.
He would not.
So much
I was
better.
raised.
Go ahead. Wait a minute.
I was raised in the suburbs. This is not 1950. All these dog whistles and racism don't work anymore. Suburbs are by and large integrated.
As the last issue of the night, Wallace asked the candidates if they'll accept the outcome of the election. Trump says he's urging supporters to become poll watchers on election night.
I am urging my people. I hope it's going to be a fair election. If it's a fair election, I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that. And I'll tell you what,
does that
from
mean,
a common sense,
does that mean you're going to tell your people to take to the street?
It means you have a fraudulent election.
Biden typically has a much different approach.
He has no idea what he's talking about. Here's the deal. The fact is, I will accept it, and he will too. You know why? Because once the winner is declared, after all the ballots are counted, all the votes are counted, that'll be the end of it. That'll be the end of it. And if it's me, in fact, fine. If it's not me, I'll support the outcome.
At the end of the debate, moderator Wallace called it an interesting hour and a half. Looking forward, the Commission on Presidential Debates announced Wednesday it will add what it calls additional tools to maintain order to the remaining 2 presidential debates. In a written statement, the Commission says the first debate made clear that additional structure is needed in order to, in the Commission's words, ensure a more orderly discussion of the issues. Reporting for Pacifica Radio News KPFA, I'm Christopher Martinez.
The chair of the Wisconsin Republican Party warned Milwaukee's chief elections official that it would be illegal for any Milwaukee Bucks basketball or Brewers baseball team players or mascots, including the Brewers' famous racing sausages, to participate in early voting events planned at their stadiums in the days leading up to the election. Also today, 5 voters in Madison asked a judge to declare that a city-organized event to collect absentee ballots was legal, even though an attorney for Republican legislative leaders said it was not. The city collected more than 10,000 absentee ballots last weekend and planned to hold another day-long event this weekend. Milwaukee and Madison are liberal strongholds in the swing state. Strong Democratic turnout in those cities is key to the strategy of Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden. President Trump's campaign would benefit from suppressed turnout there. Republicans in Wisconsin, which Trump barely won 4 years ago, and around the country, have been aggressively challenging what they see as any attempt to expand voting opportunities. Democrats accuse Republicans of trying to confuse voters and make it more difficult for Democrats to cast ballots. The Republican National Committee and Wisconsin Republicans today were fighting a federal court ruling that will allow absentee ballots postmarked by Election Day to be counted for up to 6 days afterwards. Less than 2 hours after asking a federal appeals court to suspend its ruling, allowing the 6-day window, the court denied the Republicans' request. Milwaukee plans to allow for in-person absentee voting at Miller Baseball Park and the Basketball Forum between October 20th and November 1st. Voters can vote early in person or also return their mailed absentee ballots. The executive director of the Milwaukee Election Commission said there would be no illegal electioneering at either location. She said the decision to use Miller Park and the Forum as early voting sites was based on finding a safe location to vote during the pandemic of coronavirus. A federal judge in Montana today rejected an effort by President Trump's re-election campaign and Republican groups to block Montana counties from holding a mostly by-mail general election, saying claims that the election could be marred by widespread voter fraud is a fiction. U.S. District Judge Dana Christensen wrote that when pressed during the hearing in this matter, the plaintiffs were compelled to concede that they cannot point to a single instance of voter fraud in Montana in any election during the last 20 years. And a federal judge has ruled that Indiana law cannot dismiss mail-in ballots that don't arrive at county election offices by noon on Election Day. The decision, issued late yesterday, orders state election officials to count mail-in ballots if they are postmarked on or before November 3rd and received by voting offices no later than November 13th. 11 Democratic governors issued a joint statement today defending American democracy, vowing that every valid ballot will be counted in the election after President Trump sowed distrust during the first presidential debate last night. Trump again claimed, without any evidence last night, that mail voting, surging in popularity during the coronavirus pandemic, is ripe for fraud and refused to say whether he would accept the results. He also called on his backers to scrutinize voting procedures at the polls, which critics said could cross into voter intimidation. Without mentioning Trump by name, the governors noted his refusal last week to commit to a peaceful transition of power. Signing the statement were Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, Gavin Newsom of California, Phil Murphy of New Jersey, Ralph Northam of Virginia, Jay Inslee of Washington, Tony Evers, Wisconsin, Tim Walz, Minnesota, Kate Brown, Oregon, Steve Sisolak, Nevada, Michelle Lujan Grisham of New Mexico, and John Carney of Delaware. You're listening to the evening news on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno, online, kpfa.org. A federal agency's decision to postpone naturalization ceremonies due to COVID-19 is likely to mean hundreds of thousands of people won't be able to vote in the November election. And critics of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Agency say the move can't be viewed in isolation. Nadia Ramlagan reports.
Legal director at the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, Mary Catherine Harcombe, says even before the pandemic, wait times for citizenship applications have gotten longer. She believes the agency could have readily implemented virtual or socially distanced oath ceremonies, the final step in the naturalization process, rather than shutting them down.
So it's not just something bad that has happened because of the pandemic. It is sort of the culmination of what has seemed almost like a campaign to discourage people from naturalizing by making the process slower and slower and slower.
So far, the agency hasn't released a plan for resuming ceremonies, and it's unclear how many people are waiting to take their citizenship oaths. According to agency data, USCIS completed around 156,000 naturalizations between March and August. A Pew Research Center study found an estimated 23 million naturalized citizens would be eligible to vote in November. However, Harcombe notes those who haven't yet completed the process have had their hopes dashed.
The fact that they have taken every step and did so in a timely manner, only to now be told that this final little step, just this swearing-in ceremony, could prevent them from voting in this election, is just devastating for them.
Harcombe also points out the agency has, in the past few years, implemented more measures aimed at making citizenship harder to obtain.
USCIS is traditionally not partisan. USCIS is not involved in enforcement. They aren't involved in any of sort of the harsher aspect. In the last 4 years, USCIS has really shifted its focus and its attitude.
The agency has also announced rate hikes that nearly double the cost of becoming a citizen. As of October 2nd, Harcombe says it will cost a person almost $1,200 just to file the application. However, a federal court has temporarily blocked the massive fee hike. Dozens of fees related to the immigration process are slated to increase as well. For Public News Service, I'm Nadia Ramlagan.
Airline employees and executives made futile 11th hour appeals today for Congress to approve billions more in federal aid to avert thousands of layoffs that are scheduled to start tomorrow. U.S. passenger airlines and their labor unions are lobbying for another $25 billion in taxpayer money to pay workers for 6 more months through next March. Their request is tied up in negotiations over a larger pandemic relief measure. Industry officials had admitted that the prospects were bleak for action before tomorrow's deadline. They did say they were cheered that the House this week included airline payroll help in a $2.2 trillion relief plan that moved closer to the Republicans' demand for a price tag under $1 trillion. Airlines have persuaded tens of thousands of employees to take early retirement or severance deals. But even after those offers, the airlines have more workers than they need, and indications point to around 40,000 layoffs of flight attendants, mechanics, ramp workers, pilots, and others beginning this week. American Airlines has said it expects to furlough about 19,000 workers. United Airlines still expects 12,000 furloughs, even after striking a deal to delay up to 3,900 pilot layoffs. Meanwhile, the Disney Corporation's amusement parks have just announced the layoffs of some 28,000 workers. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin held an extensive conversation today on a huge COVID-19 rescue package, meeting face-to-face for the first time in more than a month in an effort to seal a tentative accord on an additional round of coronavirus relief. After a 90-minute meeting in the Capitol, Pelosi issued a statement saying the two would continue to talk. Mnuchin said that after meeting with Pelosi and briefing top Senate Republican Mitch McConnell, that a lot of progress had been made, but there was still no agreement. McConnell said, at the very least, the positive tone set by Pelosi and Mnuchin represented an improvement over earlier statements, but McConnell said there's still a considerable gulf between the two sides. After initially saying the Democratic-controlled chamber would vote tonight on a $2.2 trillion relief bill, a debate that would have been partisan and possibly unproductive, Pelosi made an about-face and postponed that vote until tomorrow in hopes of giving the talks with Mnuchin greater breathing room. At issue was a long-delayed package that would extend another round of $1,200 direct stimulus payments, restore bonus pandemic jobless benefits, speed aid to schools, and extend assistance to airlines, restaurants, and other struggling businesses. New York Democrat and caucus chair Hakeem Jeffries said there might be a deal by the end of the week.
We remain committed to reaching an agreement and are prepared to address the pandemic in a comprehensive fashion, but do so in a way that results in getting things done for the American people, hopefully by the conclusion of this week.
One of the key sticking points has been over aid to state and local governments whose budgets have been battered by the pandemic. California has now relaxed coronavirus restrictions in 40 of its 58 counties. State officials upgraded 7 counties from its most restrictive rules. That action yesterday cleared the way for a return to indoor dining, worship services, workouts, and movies in theaters with safety modifications. The state eased its most restrictive rules in Contra Costa, Fresno, Sacramento, San Joaquin, Santa Barbara, Butte, and Yolo counties. It further eased restrictions in San Francisco, Amador, Calaveras counties. San Francisco Mayor London Breed announced the city will allow indoor dining and worship services for the first time since back in March. Restaurants will be limited at 25% of the dining room's capacity, or a maximum of 100 people. The state also issued new rules for public playgrounds that require most children to wear masks and practice physical distancing. Officially, playgrounds throughout the state have been closed during the pandemic, although many local officials have allowed children to play there. North Dakota's coronavirus case numbers have recently risen to some record highs. A new mask awareness campaign soon to be launched by the state aims to reverse that trend. But some wonder if the effort has all the right components. Mike Moen reports.
North Dakota will spend nearly $2 million in federal relief money to educate the public about the benefits of wearing masks and to practice social distancing. However, the state still won't issue a mask mandate. North Dakota State University communications professor Carrie Ann Platt says there's evidence that the two work well together.
We know from the research that having a mandate or an ordinance in place paired with a really strong educational campaign tends to result in the highest level of compliance.
Governor Doug Burgum has stated strong public support for wearing masks, but has resisted a mandate with the hope of personal responsibility taking hold. He says part of his decision is out of concern that a requirement might make opponents feel more emboldened to defy such an order. Many of those who don't want the rule say it violates personal freedoms. Platt says effective messaging should convey that masks could play a role in helping to slow the spread of the virus, potentially giving people more freedom to be active during the crisis. And she says shaming people into wearing them doesn't work.
All of us as humans do not react well to being shamed for our behavior, and it's not likely to result in future compliance from that individual.
Other communications and health experts say the no shaming tip goes for all members of the public, not just government agencies. They say people calling out fellow shoppers in stores and other settings for not wearing masks could backfire in trying to boost compliance. Mike Moen, Public News Service.
British lawmakers have renewed the government's sweeping powers to impose emergency restrictions to curb the coronavirus pandemic, although many lawmakers criticize the way Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative administration has used them. Legislators are increasingly unhappy about the government's handling of the pandemic, which went from a national lockdown in March to a patchwork of local measures of varying stringency. The government has barred people from meeting in groups of more than 6 people and banned millions of residents in northern England from mixing with people outside their household. Simon Marks reports.
The British Prime Minister has indicated further restrictions are coming in the country's battle against COVID-19. Boris Johnson, speaking at number 10 Downing Street, said the UK is at a critical moment after his chief medical advisor warned that the country does not have COVID-19 under control at all.
I wish I could tell you tonight that the impact of this package has already begun to appear, but it will take time to feed through. And yesterday we saw the biggest rise in daily cases since the pandemic began. Today, a further 7,108. We've also had a tragic increase in the number of daily deaths, with 71 yesterday and again today.
England's chief medical officer said the country has a long winter ahead of it. Simon Marks, Washington.
The Justice Department announced today that a black death row inmate who was convicted of kidnapping and killing a Texas teenager in 1994 has been scheduled for execution in November. If the lethal injection goes ahead as scheduled, November 19th, Orlando Hall would be the 8th person executed this year as part of the Trump administration's resumption of federal executions after a nearly 2-decade pause. Hall, who is 49 years old, was one of 5 men who prosecutors said kidnapped a 16-year-old girl, Lisa Renee, from her home in Arlington, Texas, to get revenge on her 2 brothers for a botched $5,000 marijuana deal. Over 2 days, she was taken to Arkansas, gang-raped, bludgeoned with a shovel, and buried alive. Hall is scheduled to die by lethal injection at a federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. Last week, Christopher Villalva, another black federal death row inmate, was put to death at the same facility for killing a couple visiting Texas from Iowa. Hall's attorneys, Marcia Witter and Robert Owen, said Hall was sentenced to death on the recommendation of an all-white jury. The lawyer said the selection of those jurors displayed racial bias. Villalva's lawyer, Susan Otto, also said race played a role in landing her client on death row. A recent report by the Washington, D.C.-based Death Penalty Information Center said black people remain overrepresented on death rows and that African-American people who kill white people are far more likely to be sentenced to death than white people who kill black people. Of the 55 inmates currently on federal death row, nearly half are African American. Around 40% are white, some 12% Latino. There's 1 Asian on federal death row. African Americans make up only about 13% of the U.S. population. Federal authorities executed just 3 prisoners in the previous 56 years. Death penalty foes accused President Trump of restarting the executions to help stake a claim as the law and order candidate. leading into the November 3rd election. A Kentucky judge today delayed until Friday the release of a secret grand jury proceeding in Breonna Taylor's killing by police. That's according to the state attorney general, Daniel Cameron's office. Audio recordings of the proceedings were originally supposed to be released today. Cameron's office asked a Louisville court for a week's delay so it could redact the names of witnesses and personal information such as addresses and phone numbers. Cameron has admitted that he never asked the grand jury to consider any homicide charges against the officers who conducted the raid which killed Taylor in her own home. There were no drugs found in that raid. A new report cites widespread disparity in policing practices between white communities and communities of color and the poor in California. Civil rights advocates are calling for the decriminalization of non-traffic infractions like standing, sleeping, crossing the street, arguing those charges are primarily levied against the homeless and people of color. KPFA's Linda Corey-Umili reports.
The report cited for being in plain sight how California polices being black, brown, and unhoused in public, analyzed data from 9 different counties in California, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Alameda. It focuses on police enforcement of, quote, non-traffic infraction citations. Those are everyday behaviors such as standing, sleeping, owning a dog, and crossing the street. The report shows that police in California issued over 250,000 of these non-traffic infraction citations in 2017 and 2018, and those cited were disproportionately Black and Latinx Americans. Elise De La Piana is the legal director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, which released the report.
Just to be clear, never in one of these cases is there damage to or harm to a person or property that's being charged. It's a criminal citation that's essentially about very benign behaviors.
For example, for every 1,000 white adults in the city of Los Angeles, 3.7 received a non-traffic infraction, whereas for every 1,000 black adults, 14 received one. According to the report, disabled individuals were at an even higher risk of being cited. According to Thurgood Marshall Fellow Tiffany Russell-Moyer, by the age of 28, a black woman with a disability is twice as likely to be arrested than a black woman without a disability. Another heavily affected group is the homeless, a group that has grown significantly in recent years. Russell-Moyer notes that this policy has neither improved homelessness nor helped these individuals obtain affordable housing.
As encampments and homeless shelters became more visible, cities throughout the country have responded by passing laws that target and criminalize unhoused people. Between 2006 and 2019, there were 92% increase in laws that criminalize camping in public. Under the guise of addressing and responding to homelessness, the police have cited, harassed, and incarcerated hundreds of thousands of unhoused people throughout the country.
The report says these infractions are increasingly becoming a large share of criminal cases filed in the state. According to Equal Justice Works fellow Tori Larson, police are spending a disproportionate amount of time and money on enforcing fines that many of the individuals cited are unable to pay, usually amounting to $200 to $500. Ultimately, unpaid infraction citations for actions like jaywalking or sitting on a sidewalk can result in misdemeanor arrest warrants. The report shows that only 46% of these fines are resolved, which has resulted in $10.6 million in criminal justice debt in California. Beyond the fines, punishment for non-traffic citations often result in some form of trauma and sometimes even death. Larson shares the story of Ronald Foster.
Ronald Foster was riding his bicycle without a headlight on February 13th, 2018 in Vallejo. This is an infraction offense. The police chased him down, tased him, beat him, and shot him multiple times in the back of the head. The consequences of infraction enforcement are absolutely dire, from unpayable, uncollectible fines and fees to death.
Attorneys for the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights say that criminal enforcement of non-traffic violations is neither effective nor just. Their recommendation is to decriminalize these infractions in the same way that previous non-traffic infractions like possession of marijuana and vending without a permit have been decriminalized in California. They say decriminalizing non-traffic infractions will lead to more positive outcomes for California's most vulnerable communities.
And that report from Linda Corey-Muli. You're listening to the evening news on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno, online at kpfa.org. It's an hour-long newscast that airs each night at 6 with a half-hour edition on the weekends, and it is archived online at kpfa.org. I'm Mark Miracle, and let me tell you, this is not easy. This is not easy at all. We are halfway through the fund drive here at KPFA, halfway through raising the $450,000 that we need to keep this radio station on the air. And speaking personally, it's not easy doing this newscast and raising the amount of money that we need to raise to keep this radio station on the air and to keep doing the news like we do here. You know, there's only two of us here. I mean, there's very few people in the station because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are operating with a skeletal staff, although people are getting plenty to eat. I mean, they're not like skeletal. It's a skeleton staff. But in the newsroom for most of the day, it's just me. And then for the end part of the day, it's for my And the News's fabulous audio technician and board operator, Janine Etter. Just two of us to do it all. And then, given the amount of news that there is to cover, it is just very difficult to have to stop and try to raise the money. But if we don't raise the money, we have to shut down, because 90% of the money here comes directly from you, the listeners, and it comes when we open these microphones and ask you to financially support this listener-sponsored radio station. To become a listener sponsor or a supporter or a donor or a subscriber. Now, the way you do that is calling us at 1-800-439-5732 or going online at kpfa.org. 1-800-439-5732 or kpfa.org. Now, I wish that the programming here, the content of the news, was such that I didn't have to ask you or plead with you to do this, but it's human nature. 1-800-439-5732. So I do have to ask you, and I have to give you that phone number, and I have to tell you the website at kpfa.org. 1-800-439-5732, kpfa.org. And I have to tell you that I have to raise $2,500 tonight, which is the largest goal that I've had thus far in the fund drive. We're trying to pick up the pace as we enter the final half of the fund drive here. Picking up the pace means a higher goal, raising more money more quickly. 1-800-439-5732, kpfa.org. 1-800-439-5732 to relieve some of my anxiety, to keep this radio station on the air. If it brings you news and information that you think is valuable to yourself, to your family, to your fellow citizens, to the city, to the state, to the universe. Help us keep this project going. It's been an experiment since we were founded in 1949. This is the way it's worked. Hasn't failed yet, although we have come up short in other fund drives. And certainly, we've come up short in individual appeals like the one I'm making right now. 1-800-439-5732 or kpfa.org. The top U.S. prosecutor in Oregon today rejected a request from Portland's mayor to end the federal deputation of dozens of police officers as part of the response to ongoing protests, saying it was the only way to end lawlessness. In a joint statement, U.S. Attorney for Oregon Billy J. Williams and Russ Berger, the U.S. Marshal in the state, swatted down Mayor Ted Wheeler's request and called him out for a lack of leadership that they said has allowed acts of violence to overshadow more than 4 months of nearly nightly protests since the police killing of George Floyd. Wheeler said that he had asked the U.S. Attorney's Office to withdraw the designation that deputized the officers. Deputizing the Portland police officers gives federal prosecutors the option to charge anyone arrested by those officers with federal crimes, which come almost invariably with more severe penalties than the state crimes for which local police usually make arrests. It also allows law enforcement a route around the county district attorney, Mike Schmidt's decision not to file state charges against hundreds of protesters arrested for low-level and nonviolent offenses, a policy that has angered some in the law enforcement community. Portland has seen protests almost every night since Floyd was killed by police in Minneapolis. Many of them have ended with some protesters vandalizing police and other government buildings, setting fires, shining lasers into the eyes of police, and throwing objects at officers. 56 Portland officers were deputized before a rally in the city last weekend by the far-right Proud Boys group. Portland city officials apparently did not know that their officers' federal deputation status would last until the end of this year. Groups opposing police violence rallied at the state capitol to demand Governor Gavin Newsom sign AB 2504, the Crisis Act. It would fund community organizations to fund to mental health calls instead of relying on police to do so. Assemblymember Buffy Wicks of Oakland is co-author of the bill. Today, the deadline for Newsom to act. California Attorney General Javier Becerra is suing the Trump administration in an effort to crack down on so-called ghost guns that can be built from parts and make it difficult to track or regulate owners. The U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives does not consider the do-it-yourself kits to be firearms, so buyers don't have to undergo any background checks. Becerra is asking a federal judge in San Francisco to order the agency to change its policy.
Once manufactured and assembled, these firearms are indistinguishable from the serialized firearms that are regulated under state and federal law. And they are every bit as lethal. In fact, in some cases, they are even more lethal, as these kits can be used to assemble assault-type weapons that are illegal under federal and certainly under state and California law. Anyone can make them, anyone can carry them, anyone can fire them. And because they lack serial numbers, these ghost guns cannot be traced by law enforcement agencies. These homemade weapons have tragically been used in mass shootings across the country and right here in California.
In fact, the parents of 2 slain school children killed by a ghost gun at Santa Clarita High School joined Becerra for his announcement. Becerra said ghost gun seizures by the California Department of Justice jumped over 500% between 2018 and last year. The Everytown for Gun Safety Group and 4 cities, Chicago, Columbia, South Carolina, San Jose, California, and Syracuse, New York, filed a similar lawsuit last month in federal court in New York. A federal judge has halted major fee increases for citizenship and other immigration benefits 3 days before they were to take effect. Oakland federal judge Jeffrey Wright says the last 2 chiefs of the Homeland Security Department were likely appointed illegally. He also says that the Trump administration failed to justify its decision as required under federal rulemaking. Fees were set to increase by an average of 20%. Changes were to include a first-ever fee for applying for asylum, $50. Asylum seekers would also have to pay $550 if they sought work authorization and $30 for collecting biometrics. The fee to become a naturalized citizen was set to jump to nearly $1,200 from $640. Fee waivers were largely to be eliminated for people who can't afford to apply. Reporter Mike Moen has more.
The fee was scheduled to increase by more than 80% to nearly $1,200. But Tuesday's ruling pauses that for now. Vina Iyer of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota says the state's immigrant population has already dealt with issues such as travel bans under the Trump administration. If the ruling is reversed, she worries this latest obstacle would be too difficult for many to overcome.
For those folks who are already here, we're afraid that this is really going to stop people from taking that last step from changing from being a lawful permanent resident to becoming a citizen and being able to get all of the rights that entails.
The federal agency handling applications says most of its revenue comes from the fees, and without the increase, it would be underfunded by $1 billion annually. It's unclear yet if the federal government will appeal the ruling, which was issued by a judge in California. In Minnesota, more than 65,000 immigrants are eligible for citizenship. Attorney Evangeline DeWan handles naturalization cases for the Immigrant Law Center. It says many clients already struggle to meet the current fee structure. And because of the uncertainty surrounding the deadline, she adds they're working on applications at an accelerated pace.
We're trying to get as many out as we can so people still have that opportunity for a fee waiver if they're eligible, or, the filing fee that's lower than it's going to be.
And Iyer says it isn't just about people who are here trying to become naturalized citizens. She's worried they'll also have trouble connecting with family members still living outside the U.S.
That importance of family and the importance of supporting family. And we see time and time again immigrant and refugee families who are giving up so much for themselves in order to, for example, support a family member abroad or to be able to bring over a child or a spouse or a parent.
She adds that if the changes ultimately go through, there's also concern that some immigrants will resort to risky loans to cover the added costs. Also under the plan, a number of fee waivers would be eliminated. The International Institute of Minnesota says most of its clients qualify for those waivers. Mike Moen, Public News Service.
You're listening to the evening news on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno, online at kpfa.org.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Edwards-Teekert.
And I'm Kat Brooks.
Weekday mornings we host Upfront.
2 hours of conversation about what's in the news and what should be.
Politics, technology.
Prisons, police.
What's happening in City Hall and at the State House.
In Washington and in the streets.
That's starting at 7 a.m. right after Democracy Now!
On Upfront.
And we are trying to work on raising $2,500 for the fund drive here at KPFA. We're halfway through the fund drive. And we're trying to pick up the pace, which means raising more money in less time. And so I'm under the gun to raise $2,500 more than any newscast thus far in the fund drive has raised. And I'm a far piece from reaching that goal. I need your help tonight. 1-800-439-5732. Please consider becoming a sustaining member. And by that, I mean deciding to contribute a specified amount each month to this listener-sponsored radio station, something that you can afford, $5 a month or $6.50 a month or $7.25 a month or $10 a month, whatever that might be, and tying it to your bank account or your credit card or your debit card. A sustaining membership means that we can count on a certain amount of money coming in each month, helps us do our planning better and achieve economies of Planning, 1-800-439-5732, or online at kpfa.org. However, if you can't be a sustainer, be a one-time person. Just lay some cash on us at 1-800-439-5732 or kpfa.org. We are trying to raise $2,500 by the end of this newscast. We've got 9 minutes left to get there. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was buried in a private ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. On the same day as her burial, Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett was on Capitol Hill meeting with Senate Republicans. Confirmation hearings on Coney Barrett's nomination will begin on October 12th. The religious organization that some people say is a cult has been seeking to erase all mentions and photos of its connection to Amy Coney Barrett, President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, from its website as she meets with lawmakers and before she faces questions at her Senate confirmation hearings. Trump's pick to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg has declined to publicly discuss her decades-long affiliation with the group People of Praise. It is a charismatic Christian organization. It opposes abortion and holds that men are divinely ordained as the head of the family and of the faith. Women are subservient to the male's direction. An analysis by the Associated Press shows that People of Praise has erased numerous records from its website. The Republican-controlled Senate Homeland Security Committee advanced the president's nomination of Chad Wolf as Homeland Security Secretary today. The vote was 6-3 along party lines. The acting secretary has found himself part of a whistleblower complaint alleging top Trump administration officials pressured Department of Homeland Security personnel to downplay the threat of Russian political interference and white supremacy. When asked about the threat of white supremacy during today's hearing, Wolf said white supremacists were a threat to the U.S., and so are anti-government and anti-law enforcement extremists.
White supremacist extremists, from a lethality standpoint over the last 2 years, particularly when you look at 2018 and 2019, are certainly the most persistent and lethal threat when we talk about domestic violent extremists. But I think your question was all of the threats facing the homeland. I don't think I would agree that out of all the threats facing the homeland, from nation-state threats to pandemics to hurricanes and the like, we cannot ignore what has been occurring over the past 4 months when we talk about anti-government extremists, anarchist extremists, anti-law enforcement folks. It's very important that we continue to look at and address the threat that's been occurring in the country over the last 4 months.
According to figures reported by the Anti-Defamation League, out of 387 extremist deaths in the United States between the years of 2001 and 2017, 70% were committed by white supremacists, Islamic extremists, or linked to 26%. Chad Wolf's nomination now goes before the full Senate for a vote. Firefighters battling the glass fire in Napa and Sonoma counties are bracing for a new onslaught of hot and dry winds that the National Weather Service says are on their way tomorrow. Weather forecasters have upgraded their alert to a red flag warning for the North Bay Mountains and areas at and around the glass fire starting at 1 p.m. tomorrow afternoon as critically dry and breezy conditions are expected in the area. Some 70,000 people remain under evacuation as firefighters brace for more dangerous fire conditions. KPFA's Christina Alnestad reports.
The glass fire has destroyed at least 113 structures, including 80 homes, 52 homes in Napa County, and 28 in Sonoma. More than 22,500 structures remain threatened and 70,000 people under evacuation orders, including the entire town of Calistoga, as the glass fire burns more than 48,400 acres and is 2% contained. More winds in the coming days are expected to bring dangerous conditions for firefighters. CAL FIRE's Billy C. says before then, Firefighters will be strengthening their lines in and around the city of Calistoga and on the Highway 12 and 29 corridor.
We're looking at a very similar wind event that when this fire first started moving out 3 days ago. So now's the time for our firefighters to buckle down. So we're preparing for the worst case scenario and we're hoping for the best. So our firefighters are going to be working around the clock securing those lines.
Some 2,000 firefighters from as far as Wisconsin and Kentucky are battling the large blaze on several fronts. They're trying to stop the glass fire from spreading further north into Lake County and Pope Valley. They're also trying to stop its spread into Angwin and Kenwood near Highway 12, where the changing winds, blowing up to 30 miles per hour, coupled with dry conditions and an uptick in winds, threaten to send the fire to Kenwood. On top of the forecast for dangerous weather conditions, CAL FIRE's Mark Brunton says they're dealing with a lack of support due to nearly 30 wildfires burning in the state today.
When you have to divide all these resources among all the fires, you just don't have typically enough stuff to do the typical operations that you have. If this were the only fire going on in the state, we'd have a lot more assets to put to work. We'd change our strategy and so forth. So just like in CZU, all of us on all these fires are having to change our typical strategy and how we're fighting the fire because of that limited resources, and then adapting to the changing fire environment where we're seeing the explosive growth of the fire. So it has really changed how we're doing business, and that's why we've had to prioritize, just much like we did in CZU. Prioritize, here's the part of the fire that we're going to put our resources in so we have the greatest amount of success. We base that on life, property, and the environment as our priorities.
According to CAL FIRE data, this fire season, more than 8,100 fire incidents have occurred, scorching more than 3.7 million acres across the state, killing 30 people, and damaging or destroying more than 7,800 structures. I'm Christina Onnested, reporting for KPFA.
We're almost at the end of the newscast, and we really do need your financial contribution here at 1-800-439-5732 or online at kpfa.org. 1-800-439-5732, kpfa.org. Uber can keep operating in London for another year and a half after winning its appeal of a decision by the British capital's transit regulator not to renew its license. The San Francisco-based ride-hailing company had challenged Transport for London's decision in late last year not to renew its operating license over safety concerns involving imposter drivers. It's a crucial legal victory in a lucrative European market as the company still struggles to turn a profit. Uber posted a $1.8 billion loss in the last quarter. Holly Hudson reports from London.
TfL, or Transport for London, rejected the ride-hailing giant's application for a licence in November 2019, citing breaches that placed passengers' safety at risk. One of the main concerns raised was a flaw in Uber's system that allowed unauthorised people to upload their photographs to legitimate drivers' accounts, which then allowed them to pick up passengers. But after hearing 3 days of arguments, the judge at Westminster Magistrates Court ruled that despite historical failings, the firm was now a fit and proper operator, and that the company had made efforts to address failings and improve standards. Holly Hudson, London.
And now we're in the final minute, calling on you who have been waiting for me to convene the Last Minute Club, the club that all procrastinators want to belong in. We are now convened and open for business at 1-800-439-5732 or pay your dues at kpfa.org for the Last Minute Club. 1-800-439-5732 or online at kpfa.org. Partly cloudy around the San Francisco Bay with highs in the low 80s tomorrow. Further inland, triple-digit highs under sunny skies. Sunny tomorrow in the central San Joaquin Valley with highs near 100. Same story for Los Angeles, highs near 100 under sunny skies.
Tune in Wednesday nights starting at 7 p.m. with Bay Native Circle, bringing you today's Native issues, people, culture, and events with weekly rotating hosts. Then at 8 p.m., it's Dead to the World with Tim Lynch, featuring the music of the Grateful Dead, the music it's influenced and influenced by. And the night at 10 p.m. with Sing Out, a showcase of the world's ever-changing music realm, hosted by Larry Kelp. That's Wednesday nights on 94.1 KPFA and kpfa.org.
You're listening to 94.1 KPFA, 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, 97.5 K248BR in Santa Cruz, and online worldwide at kpfa.org.
You're listening to KPFA.